In recent months, a seismic shift has been quietly unfolding in West Africa. A young, fiercely determined leader has taken bold steps that are sending shockwaves all the way to the marble halls of power in Paris. His name? Ibrahim Traoré. And what he just did has left French banks and much of the Western financial elite in utter disbelief. If you haven't heard about this yet, what you're about to discover could reshape how you see Africa's relationship with Europe, money, and power. Imagine being 35 years old, leading a country in crisis, and standing up to one of the world's most deeply entrenched financial systems. Not with tanks or troops, but with banking reforms and economic sovereignty. That's exactly what Ibrahim Traoré has done. His move wasn't just political, it was a financial rebellion. And it's exposed just how vulnerable some of France's colonial-era structures in Africa really are. For decades, many African countries, especially former French colonies, have operated under a system that few people outside the continent truly understand. It's called the CFA Franc system. Established in the aftermath of World War II, the CFA franc is a currency controlled by the French treasury and used by 14 African countries. It's been called a neo-colonial tool, a way for France to maintain financial control long after the flags of colonial rule came down. Under this system, African central banks are required to deposit a large percentage, historically as high as 65%, of their foreign currency reserves into an account held by the French treasury. This effectively means that France controls a significant portion of these countries' money supply, foreign exchange, and monetary policy. In exchange, countries using the CFA franc get currency stability, but at the cost of sovereignty. Enter Ibrahim Traoré, the young and defiant interim president of Burkina Faso. Since seizing power in a coup in 2022, Traoré has made it clear that his vision for Burkina Faso is rooted in self-reliance, Pan-African solidarity, and freedom from neo-colonial influence. And this year, he took one of the most dramatic steps yet, pushing for the complete abandonment of the CFA franc. In a bold speech delivered at a Pan-African conference, Traoré didn't mince words. He referred to the CFA system as a colonial shackle and declared that Burkina Faso would no longer be economically handcuffed to France. He proposed a new sovereign monetary system, potentially in collaboration with other Sahel countries like Mali and Niger, that would allow them to issue and manage their own currency, free from foreign oversight. What happened next stunned many. Just weeks after his announcement, Burkina Faso began quietly moving its foreign reserves out of French banks and redirecting them to newly established financial institutions inside Africa. This wasn't just symbolism, this was real economic divorce. And French financial analysts immediately recognized the threat. If other CFA-using countries followed Traoré's lead, France could lose billions in foreign capital flows, not to mention the political leverage that comes with controlling someone else's money. And the ripple effects didn't stop there. Traoré also invited delegations from Russia, China, and Turkey to explore direct trade and investment agreements using non-Western currencies. This was a clear signal. Burkina Faso is done playing by the old rules. No more depending on the euro, no more routing trade through Paris. Traoré's Burkina Faso wants economic partnerships based on equality, not subjugation. This isn't just about Burkina Faso. In recent months, Mali and Niger, which also experienced coups and leadership changes, have expressed similar dissatisfaction with the CFA system. Together, these countries are forming what some are calling the Sahel Resistance Bloc, a coalition of nations that are saying no to both French military presence and financial domination. It's important to understand just how big a deal this is. For decades, the CFA franc was treated as untouchable. Leaders who questioned it were often marginalized or accused of economic recklessness. But now, with young military-led governments rising across the Sahel, the taboo has been broken. Traoré isn't just changing Burkina Faso's policy, he's changing the regional narrative. Of course, France hasn't taken this lying down. French officials have issued veiled warnings, claiming that exiting the CFA zone could lead to economic instability, inflation, and investor withdrawal. But Traoré's administration has countered by pointing out the obvious. Even with the CFA system, countries like Burkina Faso remain among the poorest in the world. So what exactly is being protected? In fact, supporters of Traoré argue that breaking from the CFA is the only path toward long-term development. Without control over their own currency, countries can't set interest rates to match local realities. They can't devalue to boost exports or manage inflation independently. They're stuck in a rigid system that serves foreign creditors more than domestic needs. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about economics, it's about dignity. Traoré has framed this as a fight for national pride, for Africa to finally stand tall without asking permission from its former colonizers. He's channeling the spirit of revolutionaries like Thomas Sankara, the iconic former leader of Burkina Faso, who was assassinated in 1987 after trying to do something eerily similar: cut foreign aid, build local industries, and kick out foreign banks. Some critics say Traoré is risking too much too fast, that his lack of political experience and reliance on populist rhetoric could backfire, that he's making enemies in powerful places. But to many in Burkina Faso and beyond, he's exactly the kind of leader they've been waiting for: unafraid, unbought, and unrelenting in the pursuit of real independence. Even African diasporas in Europe and the Americas have taken notice. Social media is flooded with clips of Traoré's speeches, interviews, and bold declarations. He's become a kind of folk hero, especially among young Africans tired of economic stagnation and foreign meddling. Meanwhile, French banks are scrambling. Quiet meetings are reportedly being held at the Banque de France, trying to assess how much financial exposure is at risk if more countries walk away. Investment firms that once viewed West Africa as a stable, France-backed market are now re-evaluating their strategies. In short, the French financial establishment is shaken. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: for far too long, the prosperity of Europe, especially France, has been quietly subsidized by the controlled financial systems of its former African colonies. Now that control is unraveling. And whether you agree with Traoré's tactics or not, one thing is undeniable: he's forcing a conversation that has been buried for decades. A conversation about who really benefits from so-called stability. A conversation about whether African nations are truly free if they don't control their own money. The tremors from this rebellion are just beginning. But if Ibrahim Traoré has his way, the aftershocks will rewrite Africa's financial future. So now the question is, will the rest of Africa follow Ibrahim Traoré's lead? Will the CFA franc finally crumble under the weight of a new generation demanding sovereignty? Or will outside powers find new ways to tighten their grip? One thing's clear: Traoré's bold move has sparked a fire. And the French banks? They're no longer in control of the game. They're watching history unfold, and for once, they're not the ones writing the script. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Africa is ready for full financial independence? Or is this a risky gamble that could backfire? Thanks for watching, and stay tuned, because this story, it's far from over.